So, welcome everyone to Carving a New Path. My name is Andrea Hyland. I am the host of this podcast, of this show. And if it's the first time that you're listening to it, I just want to say that this podcast began in 2020 in response to all the change that people were experiencing. And so I started to invite people who had been, had something disrupted in their lives and they had listened to their inner voice and birthed new ways of being in the world. And so all of my guests fit that description in some way or another. And the conversations have really evolved into it's funny because I'm like, what words do I even put into that? Talking about tools and resources, but also we're going into a deeper reflection about life and how we can really impact with our presence, with our thoughts, with our ideas. And that's why I knew this conversation. My guest today is Sree Meleth. And before we begin our conversation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then you'll see that we're thinking deeper and wanting to have conversations in a deeper way. So maybe I'm stumbling a little bit today because I can feel the depth of it and I'm not even sure where we're going to go exactly. So hold on, listeners, we like to talk. So, Sree is a transformational life coach. She is certified as an EFT practitioner and public health researcher. She founded Freeing Ourselves to help clients overcome self-doubt and reach their highest potential. Sree believes from the bottom of her heart that her purpose in life is to help her clients drop these questions of value and worth and stand tall in the knowledge that they are invaluable human beings and speak their truth. Her lived experience has made Sree an amazingly gentle and supportive person who can hold the space for her clients to work through their distress and emerge on the other side with a calm, powerful belief in themselves. So welcome, Sree.
Thank you, Andrea. Such a pleasure to be here. We
I'm
have these
so
great conversations all the time, and so I'm
I
just
know. I love that. And just to listeners, just to let you in on it, we talked for about half an hour before we came to the show because there's a lot that we want to talk about and want to say. So where we're going to start today is yeah, it's funny because I feel like, well, maybe we should have started with telling your story of change in your life. And we'll save that for another day because it feels like because there's been a lot of change going on. But right now, we're going to focus on that it's really time to retell the stories of myths and history and even our family stories, to retell them so that our children and our grandchildren are hearing the stories in a different way. And that the stories that we tell, that we pass down from myths, really do influence the way women and men interact with each other. And it affects our divine potential by there not being space for us to be all of who we really are. So I know we were going to talk about the grand story of the Divine Mother, and I'm going to just turn it over to you, Sree, to begin to share anything that you feel guided to start off with today.
yeah. Thank you so much, Andrea. So we were having a conversation about the myths, right? You were talking about the myth, um, which I hope doesn't offend people, in the Bible, about the Adam and Eve myth and how Eve is portrayed. And that led me to talking about how mythology is used in India.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we have this amazing story that I translate as the grand story of the Divine Mother. It's called the Devi Mahatmyam, and the English version is my translation of it. And what is seen throughout that myth is how powerful these goddesses are.
Mhm.
They're all warrior goddesses. They're all shown to be just immensely powerful women who don't care what anybody else thinks, right?
Mhm.
Who know what their mission in life is, who are completely focused on it, who are not worried whether they look ugly, whether they look beautiful, or whether they sound bitchy, or they, none of that affects them.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that I was not aware of this myth growing up, right? I had heard about the different goddesses. So I had heard about Kali, which many people who are into yoga and, you are all may be aware of the names of Kali, Lakshmi, Durga, Saraswati, all of these goddesses. And we even celebrated, there's the 9-day festival. This myth is celebrated across 9 days, and the 10th day is a and I have actually a set of YouTube videos that goes into each day of that festival.
Mhm.
But the so even though we did all that, the actual power behind these women was never something that is promoted, right? In fact, the I was told all the time, because I was a little unruly little girl who never had her hair combed right, and didn't always have the buttons on her clothes buttoned up right. And the what I was told is, don't be like Bhadrakali, right? Don't be a Kali. You don't want to be this powerful woman who doesn't care about what she looks like, or who
Mhm.
has her hair all undone. And right, you want to be the demure, you want to be the modest, you want to be the quiet Sita, who is this very devout, faithful, powerless, more or less, woman in another myth called the Ramayana. And the the contrast between those two images of women, how women could be,
Yeah.
and what we were told how women should be, is striking. And as over the I got this book, I began to, thanks to the internet,
Mhm.
became more and more aware of the mythology behind this 9-day festival. And so I got myself a really good translation, and started reading through it, and began to explore how the myth applies to me in,
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
today's life,
Yes.
right? And how missing out on the these stories told in the way I think they should be told. Now, this is, of course, my interpretation of the myth, is has cost Indian women and girls a lot. It has told us that it is not, this is not just Indian women, but women all over the world have always been told it is not safe, right? It is not safe to be bold. It is not safe to be loud. It is not safe to be aggressive.
Mhm.
But here there is this whole myth which is entirely based on women who are entirely aggressive, right? I mean, they're violent. It's a very, very violent myth
Mhm.
where there's a lot of killing, there's a lot of gore, and it's supposed on it's supposed to be an analogy of our journey from lack of knowledge to knowledge, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And how we attain enlightenment. So how we become, and so the reason, if you don't, like in all myths, you're not supposed to take everything just at face value. The reason there is so much gore and violence is because the battle in our minds is often gory and violent,
Yes.
right? When we are struggling with this need to become wiser, with this need for enlightenment, with this need to fully understand that we are all expressions of the divine, and the way we are able to fully express that divinity is by sort of taking out sheaths that are covering that divinity. That, the thing about freeing ourselves is that as we learn to undo these questions of value and worth, what should emerge, what will emerge, is this beautiful, brilliant human being, not perfect, who is allowed to be bitchy, who is allowed to be ugly, who is,
Mhm.
this person who has all of those, in quotes, flaws, but is so comfortable with herself that she doesn't need anybody's approval. She doesn't need anybody else's support. She is fully powerful in her own self. And as a result of that, she is able to create a space in which everyone else around her is able to be exactly who they are and be themselves. And that, being able to do that, would change everything in the world. If everybody felt safe around you because you recognize that you didn't need anyone else to make you feel safe, all of our interactions would change. Nobody would have to be subject to anybody else's whims and fancies. Does that, I don't know,
Oh
that
yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting because I have several stories of my own journey in life, just popping into my mind about times where I needed to stand up for myself about
yeah,
things. And I was raised by a mother, and again, this isn't about blaming her. This is understanding what she was taught and how she was raised. And it was that you do not raise your voice
yeah,
to anyone. It is not nice. You be nice, you be kind, you be polite. And not to say that, I mean, one time she thought my sister had said something mean to a neighbor child, and my mother chased my sister through the house, yelling at her. So, it's like, do not. So she knew how to raise her voice, but we were taught, do not do that. And there were a couple of times in my life where I needed to really stand up for myself, and kind of the backlash. She was like, I didn't teach you to yell. I didn't teach you to, and it's like, that's right. I'm needing to
to learn.
actually learn that, because sometimes you're in a situation where someone is taking advantage of you, and you might say something politely. You might, yeah, I was in a situation where I was living with a whole bunch of people, and someone started using my bedroom as their acupuncture office when I traveled for a couple of weeks. And I came back and she's telling me, well, I need you to let me know when you're going to be in there because I need to schedule my client. I was like, no, I'm like, did something change while I was gone? I checked with all the roommates. No, that's your bedroom. She shouldn't be using your bedroom. And it ended up with me screaming at her at the top of her lungs, at the top of my lungs, to get her attention of like, no, this
Yeah,
is my, and being called a bitch because of it. And I was like, that's right. I
yeah,
am now a bitch.
yeah,
I claim it to stand up for my rights. And the thing is, people will push you around. And it's not that yelling is the first thing
hmm,
we need to do in most situations, but we may need to take someone to court.
yeah,
We may need to get help from other people. And yeah, I've had a couple of instances where someone has screamed at me, but I knew I had gone through all the channels of trying to work through something, and it was like, no. And it's like, I'm sorry you're upset. Yes, you can yell at me, and I can actually stand here knowing that I'm standing up. I've stood up for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, the police are actually here to evict you. And, it's like I'm no apologies for
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
having gone through all of the other paperwork, communication, da 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 da. So, I'm just thinking about this of how little girls are taught,
Yeah.
you know, to be nice, be
Yeah.
sugar and spice or whatever the words are in different cultures. And we really need the stories where the goddesses say, enough.
Yes.
We are going to burn it down.
Yeah.
We are not going to take this anymore. And it's powerful to have those. And I know you and I have been talking about like getting to the root of these stories where we're not making them wrong
Yeah.
for what it took for them to break free, which also, and I know that you work with clients around this of breaking free, freeing yourself is sometimes the battle is within you that you're going to have to make a change. And there's that struggle, that fighting the demon is actually the story that's going on inside of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because, I have a granddaughter who's 11,
Mhm.
and it's amazing, and she's she was born and she brought up in America, right? And but yet it's frightening almost to see how often she apologizes for nothing.
Yes. Phew.
So it's this thing in the culture that permeates everything, that teaches young girls to apologize for
Yeah.
for nothing at all often, right? And it's so I've begun to talk to, I mean, hopefully at some point she'll also read the blog posts, and but one of the most the loveliest stories in that myth, and before I go there, I wanted to say that um, I have a whole series of blog posts about this myth now called the Grand Story of the Divine Mother. And then one the name of one of them is Sometimes I'm a Bitch and It's A-okay.
Yes. Yes. It's like that is a power. I mean,
Yeah,
it's one thing if you just want to go spew goo on
yeah,
people. That's not what we're talking about.
yeah,
We're talking about the superpower that is
yes,
when you really need to stand up for
yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah. And so there's this in the third, the myth is divided into three stories of where the three different goddesses incarnate. So the first one is Kali, the second one is Lakshmi, and the third one is Saraswati, who's supposed to be, in all our minds, she's the goddess of wisdom and supposed to be gentle, but she's in her fiercest form here. She's the fiercest of all of the three in
Mhm.
the myth. So what happens is that the two demons have taken over all of the gods, the gods of rain, the god of the sun god, everybody. They've taken over that whole kingdom, and they're ruling over it. They've driven out all of these other demigods out of that place, and then so they go and supplicate, uh, and they pray to this goddess, to the goddess, and she comes um, to help them. So she is this amazingly beautiful, indescribably beautiful woman, and she's positions herself on a swing in the foothills of the Himalayas. And it turns out that the demons who have taken over everything, their lieutenants are going through there, and they see this unbelievable beauty, and they go and tell their masters that you have everything, everything that is superlative in the world, how come you don't have this
Mm.
amazing, beautiful, the most beautiful person in the world, the woman? You absolutely need to own her, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And the thing is, she knows that what she's going to do is kill them. That's why she's come here.
Uh-huh.
But she doesn't do anything. She just sits there. She just waits there, right? Knowing that when the time is right, every things will work out in the way they're supposed to be. So the first general they send towards to her, they because they think she's a woman. I mean, there's no
Mhm.
army around her. She's just, he sends one of his lowliest generals to her, and she says, he says that one of the, you have to marry one of them, and she says, well, unfortunately, I've made this vow that I will only marry a person who can defeat me in battle. So it has to be someone who matches my prowess. And the lieutenant is mad. He said, "How dare you even think about challenging my
Mhm.
masters? They're ruling the world. How can you even think about that?" And she says, "What can I do? I made a promise, right? It's my vow, and I have to keep to it." So he says, "I'm going to drag you by the hair and take you back to them." And she says, "Fine." So he rushes towards her, and all she does is she steps down from the swing, and she takes a deep breath and lets it out. Like there's a
Mhm.
sound, and the guy just crumbles into ash as
Uh,
he's rushing towards her, and the entire army scatters, and that image for me of her just stepping down,
Yeah.
like, I think of her as standing like Wonder Woman, hands on hips, and okay,
Mhm.
come, and
Right.
then nothing can touch her.
Mhm.
To have an image of a woman who can do that, can
Yes.
stand that powerfully in her power, in
Mhm.
her knowledge of her own prowess, to have that told to a little girl
Mhm.
would make such a difference, rather than saying, you need to be quiet, you need to be
Right.
subdued, you need to be docile, don't be too aggressive. that that thwarting of what stories need to be told, and this is also, like we were talking before we started recording, right? It's not just about empowering women, it's not just about empowering girls, it is creating that space where everybody feels safe and everybody feels valued, so that the men don't have to feel that they have to put their demonstrate their power in order for them to feel that they're being who they're meant to be, because this kind of distortion messes up everything, right? There is it's not quite related, but it is still, there is that story, the book about the social worker who wrote, the name of the book is My Grandmother's Hands.
Oh
It,
yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And he talks about how racial discrimination affects not just the discriminated, but it
Right.
also affects the discriminator. And there is
Absolutely.
healing to be done on both sides. And what we do when we begin to retell these stories is that we begin to create an atmosphere in which that all around healing can take place,
Mhm.
instead of, um, I mean, we will still hear people talking about feminazis and stuff like that.
That's okay.
But once it becomes a real substrate, like a real part of the culture, when these news stories become a part of our mythology, I think conversations change. I think with the way people feel in themselves changes, and that by itself creates an atmosphere where everyone is in their power, and also at the same time everyone feels safe. I think that's the ideal.
I agree with you. And when you were telling the story and then Sarasvati, the the general just crumbling, I thought, yes, I'll just say for a girl to see her power, that she has power,
Yeah.
that's one thing. And then the next part is teaching her how to use that power.
Yes.
And I feel like one of that because obviously we don't want to go around and like turn everybody to ash.
Yes.
Um, that's not what
No,
we're
no.
aiming for here. It's not about let's empower girls and turn men to ash.
Yeah.
It's that we've been taught as girls that we do not have power.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that looks like we have power, we've been told to suppress that and that is a bad thing to do. So the story shows women have power.
Yeah.
And now, how do you use that power? And it's the same thing with boys, that boys have been, well, for one thing, I'm really aware of because I spend so much time with my grandson, who's now 2. One of the things I'm really aware of with him is uh, wanting him to be able to express his emotions and teaching him what to do with those emotions that he's feeling. He feels things very deeply.
Mm.
And boys, by the time they're like 4 years old, 5 years old, there are studies that show that's when people start shutting down boys, saying, no, don't feel, or boys don't cry, or, so we're focused on both. And one of the reasons that I've been so focused on women, I'm sure part of it is to heal my own voice, find my own voice, learn how to use my own power, and then empower girls. And with the idea that you have power, and it's not about power over people, it
Mm.
is about your power, how to use that power, how to stand up for yourself, and how to tap into your vast amount of creativity and self-expression and how you want to bring that into the world. So it's both and
Yes.
that we're focused on. But one of the problems in our society is I believe that when I've been with groups of women, that sometimes when they start to feel their power, the first thing is, but what about the men? So there is a concern around if we were to fully use our power, how is that going to affect men? And the thing is, we're denying that men have their own agency.
Yeah.
We've been taught that, oh, it's women who, if you were harmed physically by a man, it's because you did something to set him off, as if he doesn't have his own power to process his own emotions and feelings. And so that's part of where the disconnect is and why someone wants to call me a feminazi, go for it. And I'm, the focus is to create space for women to use their voices and to encourage men the same thing, to learn um, about how to use their power and to feel their feelings. Because I think that some of the suppression around being taught that they're not supposed to feel becomes like a volcano that
Yeah.
is going to erupt. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I don't know where else to go with this now.
Yeah. I feel like we kind of went around with the whole thing, and I'm just going to look back to see well, you know what? We'll just thank you, listeners, for being here. We're gonna wrap up the show now, but before we do that, because I know that we're going to have other conversations. We're going to come back and talk about this and other things. I know you were talking about a meditation. Do you want to share what that
Yeah.
meditation is?
Yeah.
And then,
I have a meditation. I call it Allow Life. And this came to me as I realized that every time, say this is in my marriage, for example, every time I judge my husband and I say, I wish he was different,
Mhm.
I wish he reacted differently, I am, in a certain sense, I am denying him that moment of his existence,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, because I'm saying you don't deserve, or you don't deserve to exist in this moment in the way you do exist. You have to be the way I want you to be,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, so I began to understand that, and I began to use this process where I got centered, I got fully into my body, and then created a space where the idea is that I allow him to be exactly who he's being in the moment without
Mhm.
me having to change. I don't have to change, he doesn't have to change. We're just allowing life exactly as it is.
Mhm.
And what I have discovered is that when I still have to practice this, like even over the weekend, I've had instances where I had to really, really want to
Mhm.
dive into this meditation and really do it for myself. But what I find is that when I'm able to do it correctly, correctly, like fully be present and fully allow, it's miraculous what happens.
Mm.
Because I'll just briefly, there's this whole idea of neuroception that Dr. Porges has talked about, where our neurophysiology is constantly scanning the atmosphere, right, to the environment to see if we are safe or not.
Mhm. Mhm.
So when we are attacking, verbally or emotionally, or even if we are feeling like we are defensive, the other person in that interaction also does not feel safe.
Mhm.
So when we are able to do this kind of work where we get into our body and feel safe ourselves, that energy, this thing about our energy affects other energies is not, it's actual science, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like this is science that they have worked on and shown, and there are theories about. So then he begins to feel safer. He begins to not feel a need to be defensive.
Mhm.
And that allows for deeper conversation. That allows for some healing in the moment and also for an opening for deeper conversations. So I have an audio version of that, and I would love to share that with your listeners. And
Wonderful. Yeah. And that'll all just
yeah,
letting everyone know that look at the show page because the description, because there are different social media links and website. There's like broad links to the blog posts and a link to receive the meditation. So thank you for that. And I want to say that's actually a demonstration of how to use your power,
yes,
how to cultivate that within yourself that doesn't need to get to a point where you need to burn it all down,
yeah,
and at least it's a starting point of
yeah.
doing that within yourself. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, no, I would love, when I send the link, I'll have a way for people to get back in touch with me to share their experiences with the meditation and how it's affecting them and what changes hopefully it's bringing about in their lives as they allow
Yes.
life. That's the whole point. And this will also work if you're resisting something in life, right? So if something is happening in your life and you're saying, no, I don't want this, no, I don't want this, if you're able to get into that space and just
Yeah.
allow, breathe and allow, the dynamic changes completely. It's just
Yeah.
miraculous. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. And I know we're going to do some other ones, and so we'll just see what comes up. But I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation and the teaching that's in this for all of us, that it's important that we all learn that we do have power and how to use that power. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been just such an amazing conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you to the listeners for being here, and we will see you another time. Bye bye now.